is Friday, thank God. So happy Friday to those who are in Friday, and you might already be Saturday if you're further ahead. Nonetheless, I'm going to be taking a look at more ChatGPT-4o content, and then also Fantasy Ground. So what I've tried to do is a split screen. Let me know if you guys like this or not. Essentially, what I tried to do before is keep Fantasy Grounds forward up front and then have like ChatGPT or a smaller window within. I've got a little bit of critique for my last couple of videos, so I'll try this out, see if this works. Essentially, I'm going to be creating content and putting it into Fantasy Grounds via the campaign or book. So technically, I just have the 5e rule set loaded in Fantasy Grounds, but I don't have any modules or books, so there's nothing loaded at all. I'm just simply entering text and basically not worrying about parsing or making characters or anything like that. So it's just everything pretty much from scratch. It's a brand new campaign. No extensions, no themes, nothing. Just Fantasy Grounds. The only thing I changed was the dice down here and the arrangement of the windows. Other than that, everything's pretty much stock. So what I'm going to be doing is using ChatGPT-4o. This is the Plus account version. And what I want to do is show you just a section here that you can use in ChatGPT. So over here on the left, these are called projects. Essentially, you can start a new project, and what we'll do is we'll say Fantasy Grounds content, just for the lack of a better name. And once you do that, you can add instructions, you can add files. So this is an important piece of using an AI tool if they offer this. The only other one I know that can kind of do this is the Google Notebook LM, where you can upload files. So what I'm going to do here is upload a couple templates and the 5.2 SRD if you want to use that. I'm just going to use it for this video, but essentially I'm going to upload project files. So I'm going to go onto my hard drive and take a look and try to find some of those downloads that I have. So here's some earlier ones. So I'm going to take this information here and drag and drop it over into my project files as some of the information that I want to have available for the content. Now this could be other PDFs, other rule sets, doesn't have to be D&D. But just keep in mind, I believe there's a file size. So if you have really large PDFs, I wouldn't try to upload those. And as I noticed before, that a lot of times the format, and if your PDF has a lot of pictures and stuff in it, it's not really going to help much. I think it's just a way that to help basically make it so that if you condense it down, is what I'm trying to say, that the text is better than a bunch of pictures. So I want to say this is an NPC. We'll say right now I'm looking at my template 2024 5e. I'll say 2025 monster manual. It's kind of wordy, but this is a template. And this is the sort of thing that you want to start with before you start working on any projects, is to get your writing style or a template of your layout, however you want it to look, or the output that you're looking for. And that's really an important thing for Fantasy Grounds for parsing, especially for tables, which I call rollable lists, because if you guys have watched my other shows, I don't say table because then it will make a table, and I actually just need the text. So template. So what this is basically just text, and this is the actual format, the exact format that I want. I don't want anything else, but I am going to add something down here. So I'm going to call this an info or information, and then area or information, just that. And then in the information section, I want an appearance. I want tactics, so in case this is a monster or something, And then we're going to go with gear and or loot and or let's go with summons or minions, I guess you could say. But basically, these are the other bits of information that I might want to include in, on the second page or the other tab. This way, you have a little bit more content and it's not as vague or generic. So these are just stuff I add to my NPC stat blocks, but you certainly don't have to do that. So this is the template. So I'm going to hit File, Save As, and I'm going to say 2025 5e NPC template, something like that. And this way, I have it saved on my hard drive. And then what I'm going to do is drag that over as well. So this is going to be my template for any stat blocks. This way, it knows exactly how I want it formatted. And then the SRD is just going to be for reference so that it can pull on that and kind of keep in line with copyright, sort of. I mean, I don't really care about that because I'm not selling anything, but if you were going to make stuff commercial, you'd probably want to feed it like an OGL or some kind of base license type thing. And that way you're not stealing or borrowing too much content from the official rule set. So like if I was doing Pathfinder, I'd probably have like the Archives of Nethys stuff, just anything that's not really like an adventure path, that sort of thing. Or if you have like a real base book that everything is based on, I'd probably upload that. You can take a PDF and strip it down to its core to just the text and remove the pictures. That might reduce the file size. So if you've got like a 300-page PDF with a bunch of graphics and it's over a certain amount, I don't remember what the file limit size is. I think it's around 30 megs or so. I know that Paizo does a pretty good job with their compression and the size of their PDFs. They're generally not too big, but there's some other ones out there that are pretty big. So that is some of the things that I upload when I do this every time I start a new project or a new rule set or whatever you're trying to do. So I want to find my rollable lists because that's the other one. Oops, I didn't want to look in there. So I want to go to, so I'm just showing you the setup process because I think this is where a lot of people get lost kind of. They'll try to do this without much direction, and then once you get going, you realize how much work it is, and then you're like, oh my God, this isn't what I wanted, and it can get really messy. So it does help to have these templates in place. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make here. Here's a rollable list instructions. That's what I wanted. So what this is basically how do I want a list to look like, or how do I want this I don't want HTML. I don't want anything like that. I just want to have just text. So a title, 1D4 or whatever result, and then here's the thing. I don't want a whole bunch of fancy bold letters, and I don't want like the lines or the table. I just want this. And that's kind of what I did. Is this is just the rollable list formatting for Fantasy Grounds Unity import tool, and here's the instructions. So that's basically what this is all about. So close this. Don't save that. Here's the SRD. Anyway, so those are that, and then I want to upload my adventure template. So let me see if I can find that. Adventure creation template. So this is something that I use occasionally. So this is basically the guideline for me. So adventure creation template. plain text output only. So I want introduction with story lore, story background, adventure setup, recommended levels, tier, and player numbers. So, how many players and all that stuff. Then you get into the adventure. So repeated entries for consistency in formatting and text structure. So I just said area 1, area 2, area 3, or I just did that, just kind of give it a rundown of how I want the formatting to go. And then each area has encounter notes, tactics, mechanics, NPCs, hazards, traps, tricks, puzzles, setbacks, read aloud, aftermath. There's different things that can each one of those areas or sections can contain. Normally, I use a rule of 3. So if I'm doing like a short adventure, like a one shot, I just use. It's kind of like the 5-room dungeon. So if you look that up, it's a writing style technique for developing an adventure, a short one. But what I'll do is I'll just kind of make up my own variation. I do like 3 acts or 3 main parts. Each part has 3 chapters. Each chapter has 3 sections. And then that way I'll always know what it's going to be like. So that's kind of the way I go with a lot of these adventure writing, because it's consistent. There's always, I always kind of know what to look for, and it really helps for outlining. And you'll kind of get familiar with your own process after a while once you develop your template. So these are just some of the things I've done to kind of streamline it. And then after you're done with all the meat of this, then I usually do an outro, which is like aftermath, consequences, maybe a read aloud ending, maybe an epilogue. Maybe you can do a most valuable player, like one of your players, the key contributor type thing, at the end of your sessions. And then you get new monsters for an appendice, new mechanics, new magic items, that sort of thing. And then a legal section. So that has your attribution, licenses, disclaimers, all that stuff. So that's kind of the format that I go for. Earlier on, when I was first doing this, it was really hard to get any AI tool to do this, because it would wander after just this a little amount of information. It would just start doing all kinds of random stuff. It's getting a lot better. When you use AI tools to write now, the context is longer. You still have to kind of watch it. So if you go on and on and on, eventually it's going to start forgetting what you did, and it's going to start giving you errors. So you kind of have to choose your battles on how much information. And I think it works really well with one-shots. When you get beyond a regular standard length adventure, it starts to get kind of wonky. So if you're going to do a large project, I would probably do it by chapter or by section, or by part. So I usually do part 1 with 3 chapters with 3 parts each, that sort of thing. If I'm going to do a full-length adventure, I will do between 6 and 9 parts. And if it's a big epic campaign, I'll do like 12 or 15. So they're all derivatives of 3. And then each one of those, like I said, has 3 different parts. So I kind of do that. You don't have to use the rule of 3, but you can use however you want. But generally speaking, that's how I do it. This one here is more of a generic adventure output. So I don't know if I want to use this or, yeah, I'll go ahead and use this. So this is the old method that I used to use. This will work though. It kind of gives me a, kind of a starting point, and it kind of makes it more uniform to create content. And it really does help overall when you're trying to keep, organized, is kind of what I'm saying. So that was adventure creation template. Okay, so where is that at though? Let's see, downloads. Nope, not that. Documents. Okay, this might be it. So adventure. Yeah, campaign curator, campaign builder, template instructions. Let's see if that's the same thing. Yeah, so this was one of my other templates. So I can change this up to, this was a long prompt that I used like probably about a year ago, and this was a little bit much. This is a lot of information for that to be picked up through an AI tool. It doesn't help. If you got this huge, yeah, see, this is really big. I don't think I would use those. I learned that the more stuff you have, the worse off it is. It's better to keep it simple, small, start with baby steps. You don't have to have the whole thing written in one fell swoop. The way to get consistency here is to use this project, and that will give you conversations that are based off of this information. Once you write the outline and you have the whole thing kind of laid out, then you upload that to the project file, and that becomes your basis. And then you just start writing chapters, or you make images, or you do tokens, or whatever you want to do. But that's how I organize the information in ChatGPT. There are other tools out there, like I think Grok and Anthropic does better with writing. But when it comes to all around, like artwork and brainstorming and the other stuff, like writing, I think ChatGPT does better overall as like a kind of like a catch-all. But the other ones have better writing capability, meaning it's more natural. It doesn't feel as generic. It just seems more logical. It just has a lot more structure to the writing. So depending on what you're doing, I would, consider maybe using another tool, not just for everything. So if you don't like the writing style that you're getting from ChatGPT, for instance, you can try one of the other ones. I recommend Grok for writing, and Anthropic Sonnet, whatever it's called. That one works good for writing as well. Both of those are really good. ChatGPT does good like all around, kind of for everything. And then I use, if you want realistic images that are a little bit more video game looking, I use Ideogram. There's more super high quality. But if you use Fantasy Grounds or a role-playing game and you don't want all that realism, just use ChatGPT has changed their images so that it's a little bit more consistent. So you could use that too for like if you want the more cartoonish kind of, storybook format that looks more like a role-playing game product, and you can get away with that depending on what you prompt. But I think this is just opinion. I could be wrong. It may not work for you guys. It just depends on what you're doing. So I need to find, where is that campaign? I need to search for that. No, it was called Adventure. I keep opening it, but okay, here it is. 5e Fantasy Adventure Creation Template. That's what I wanted. So I upload, these are all the starting points. And what I'm going to do is prompt to create some sort of one-shot. So if you guys have a suggestion, or you wanted to see what direction it will go, I'm totally fine with that. So I gave it project files, and now I'm going to add instructions. So I want to output only in plain text. Very important if you're going to copy and paste. You don't want all the extra formatting, all the extra characters that you can't see, like ligatures and M dashes and all this other stuff that's in the background, like the spaces in between the letters. That's kind of how they find out if there's M dashes in a lot of ChatGPT output. And that's one way they can tell that it was written by an AI program. Is the way it spaces the characters, there's an invisible markup in there. So that's kind of one way they can detect it. So output only in plain text, concise, creative, and helpful content creation assistance. So I'm kind of telling it what I want back, like how I want it to respond, what I'm using it for, that sort of thing. and that helps steer it a little bit. It doesn't really tell it what to do. It just kind of steers it in that direction. There's really no way to control it, but this helps. So output in plain text only, or output only in plain text. Answer with concise, creative, and helpful content creation assistance. That's all I want. I don't want a bunch of GM advice and all other stuff. Not in this case. So use the SRD 5.2 content and the templates where and when applicable. I don't know if it cares, but that's something that I ask it to do. I want it to use that stuff first, the stuff I uploaded. I've had problems with this before. Sometimes it just won't do it. So it really depends on what exactly you're putting into it, but sometimes it just won't do it. It won't take that information that you were trying to input or leave as their standard. It's sometimes, I don't know why, but it sometimes just won't take from memory. I'll say formatting templates are for fantasy grounds. I'll say 5e rule set parsing, because that's really what comes down to. Not everything is parsed, but a lot of stuff like tables, NPCs are. Even spells, items, it's really helpful to have that text output the correct way. Okay, formatting of text templates are for Fantasy Grounds, or for the Fantasy Grounds virtual tabletop 5e rule set parsing. Okay, so that's kind of a directions thing, like do this, do that. Here's how I want you to respond. Okay, so that's kind of your starting point. You want to be there before you really get going. Obviously, you're going to experiment and play around with it and do other things. But once you start really kind of getting serious about it, make a project and then base all your work on that project. So in this case, if I wanted to write an adventure, everything's going to be in this project. So I open that project folder. I can start multiple conversations, but each conversation is going to kind of tie back to one another and to the files and the commands or the instructions that I created. So it's kind of like having a little corner there for whatever project you're using. So this is a kind of a big deal. This isn't really new, but I think maybe less than a year. Projects has been around. I didn't know how to use it at first, but now I'm starting to understand it. So this is a way to kind of make a custom ChatGPT that's more focused on what you're trying to do. It could be programming or whatever, but you got to give it some basis there, like your templates and your rule set or whatever you're trying to do. Maybe even some websites, links or something like that. And then here's your instructions for the type of output that you want. So I don't want a whole bunch of fancy, writing. It'll still do it, but it knows, at least in the instructions, that I want this output to be more plain and not so fancified. It'll try to make like all these indents and like little icons and emojis and stuff. I don't want all that stuff. I just want plain text. So if you guys have anything that you're interested in, like a one shot, let me know. Thanks Drake Takes for the raid. I guess they about 5 or 10 minutes ago they dropped by with 7, so that's cool. Thanks guys. Anyway, so this is kind of my starting point. Blank campaign, so not creating content in my running campaign, my game that I'm working with to play. This is a whole separate thing for making content. When I'm done making the content, then I'll export it as a module and load it inside of my campaign or separately or whatever. So this is a good practice to get into, because what happens is when you start adventuring and then you get halfway through the adventure and you start to make content, you start to realize, crap, how am I going to use this in other places? And that's when it gets to be an issue, because then you can't use the content unless you export it. And then at that point, it's very convoluted. It's mixed with a whole bunch of other sources. You've got books and stuff from the forge and stuff that you've imported. It gets really messy. So that's why I do it this way, is you want to make a work campaign first and then a play campaign. And that way you're not painting yourself into a corner later on. In the beginning, it's not a big deal. If you make a couple things, no big deal. You get, a month or two into this, and you go, well, I want to use this cool monster in another game. How do I do that? It can get kind of convoluted and messy after a while. So this is probably your best practice in regards to content creation, is just start getting in the habit of, you can build stuff in your current campaign, but I wouldn't think of it as being permanent. I would look at that as a temporary thing, because it's harder to export that out and separate it from the stuff you're loaded, stuff you're using, stuff you're running, as opposed to stuff you're going to introduce later as a adventure or as content. So you gotta want to figure that out. So I think I'm going to start prompting it to make. What should we start with? A adventure outline? Should we just make like a random NPC, kind of build off of that? Or we can just start feeding it stuff and see where it takes us. I mean, that's kind of how I do it. I either have a plan, I go into it with, okay, I want this in a swamp, I want these levels, I want this theme. I do that sometimes, but sometimes or maybe we'll make a picture, and start from there. So that's another thing about doing it, this type of thing is, yes, it's kind of cheating. You're kind of going through and using AI to do a lot of the heavy lifting, but you still can direct it. You still steer it. So that's the important part, I think, is the steering part of it. Once you kind of have an idea of what you want, it makes it a little bit easier. But I kind of like the randomness too. Like sometimes it comes up with some very surprising or worthy things to keep for playing and such. And I don't have this like bias, and it really does sometimes help creatively to just start with an image or start with a one monster and build from there. So what do you guys think? Should we do a monster and some pogs, or should we try to build an adventure? Or, I mean, this is kind of right now, I'm kind of in adventure building mode in Fantasy Grounds, but I can change that around anytime. So we can import NPCs in the 5e rule set, and you can import tables. The rest of it is all copy and paste. There's no automation other than those two. If you're going to do like stories and such, that's all just copy and paste, copy and paste. Some rule sets more so than others. Some rule sets have an NPC import tool, but most of the core rule sets have table imports. So if you like building tables, learn how to use the table importer. And if you like to build NPCs without a bunch of time, you can import those, provided the text is the correct format. And that's kind of true of any of the text importing tools, is the formatting has to be correct. It has to be the proper arrangement. It has to be just right. So what I was showing you guys earlier was the NPC stat block. So I'm going to take a look at, let's look at the SRD really quick and see what their stat blocks look like. It's probably going to be okay, because they're not going to have pictures, which really helps. For some reason, if you have like a PDF that has a whole bunch of like pictures and artwork and tables and stuff, that kind of gets in the way. And then you have to redo all the text. So that can be annoying and more time consuming. So if you're copying and pasting from a published adventure, it makes it harder, because you got to go around a lot of stuff and it takes time. So here we go. This is kind of the new format. So you can take this and copy and paste. I want to see what it's going to look like in regards to how it's going to come out. what it's going to look like if I copy and paste. We'll take a look at the text. Here's a hobgoblin captain. That's kind of done. Hydra. These are all the basic monsters. There's only like 44 in the SRD. So, and they want it low levels, so probably just a kobold. That's kind of boring. Let's do a Lamia. Those are cool. You don't see those very often. So I'm going to copy and paste this information. So I want to go like that. So I'm going to hit copy, Control C, and let me go into here and see what this is going to look like. So that's kind of important. So this is not going to work out for formatting. This is a little bit off. So what you would want to see here on the top is the mod save across the top. If you don't, it's not going to parse properly. So let me see if I can fix this without breaking it. Yeah, it's already acting weird. It's something to do with the spacing. There's some spacing in there or some kind of way that the text is formatted that kind of breaks it. So this is kind of what you want to see for the ability scores right here for 5e for the new rule set. For the legacy, it's a little different. The way it's laid out is different. But all of this stuff here has to be right. It has to be. You have to have a period after these traits. You have to have the spell casting here with the period, and then it has a statement, and then the list of spells has to be in a certain way. And if you don't do it this way, it can create grief for you. Sometimes these extra spaces will be bad. So I know that if this initiative is not on the same line with the armor class, it's not going to work. It has to be like this. Otherwise, it won't parse into Fantasy Grounds properly. So there's a few little things I had to do to make sure that it's parsing correctly. So that's what I uploaded for the actual the template is something that looks more like this. It was just a little bit different, but not much. So let's see what happens here. So we'll take this and let's say we're going to base an adventure around this, but I want to say something like create a variation of the Lamia above prior, or let's say give it a formal name and some custom options like a melee weapon, something like that. So we'll see what it does. So it's going to look at what we've already put, and it has the instructions behind it. So hopefully the stat block will turn out right. Usually I end up fighting this thing so much, and I've done this ever since I started doing this. So let's see. Okay, it's already kind of doing its own thing, so I like it. So traits, Silvertongue. Silvertongue Zerethus has advantage on charisma, deception, persuasion checks. Elegant duelist. When wielding her gilded scimitar, Zerethus can use her dexterity modifier, so she kind of has like a bardic kind of thing going on. She has magic resistance, a multi-attack. She has a gilded scimitar on and one with her claw, or she replaces one attack with corrupting touch. Here's her gilded scimitar. It does 1d8 plus 4 slashing damage plus an average of 7 psychic damage. So that's pretty cool. There's the claw attack. There's the corrupting touch. Here's the spell casting. And then here's the information that I usually put on the other tab. So let's see how that looks. So in NPCs, when we open up the import text, There's the window. So on the left-hand side, this is for all the stat block, and all the other stuff goes on the right-hand side, the information. So if you're going to do this or something like it, you want to just copy the stat block. So that's all the way up to where the last spell is. And hit copy, and then Control V as in Victor, right click, clean up text, and that's going to get rid of the extra spaces and kind of condense it a little bit. And then this stuff down here, the information, all this cool stuff, is just for fluff and flavor and more information. So we're going to put this, I'll make this a header, right click, clean up text, and then I'll make these bold for a little bit of formatting. And here's the gear loot summons. 1d3 minor fiendish trinkets. Scroll of suggestion. Assortment of enchanted jewelry worth 500 gold. Gilded scimitar. Ornate, non-magical, but valuable. So now you got to make sure that you have the correct import mode. It's defaulting to D&D 2024 core rules, but if you're using like the older rules, you're going to want to use the 2022 Monsters of the Multi-Universe formatting or import tool. And you want to make sure that the ability scores, they're going to look different. They're not going to be laid out like this, and there's a few other differences in that template. I have some of the older ones on the website, on our website. So we'll see if this parses correctly. So here's a moment of truth. I don't know if I want this comma in here. So what I'm going to do is, I know parentheses will work. Here we go. And I'm going to hit import, and we'll see if it works. Looks like it does so far. Yep. So what you're looking for is all this stuff being in the right spot. And this gear section, I'm going to have to figure that out because that should be listed. This is a new field, so I got to figure out where that should be listed. Probably somewhere in this group here. And then here's the speed, hit points, alignment, type, size, initiative. Here are all of the traits, all of the actions. There's the spells. Let's take a look at the notes. Yeah, so it looks pretty good. So this format right here with this summary, this is done automatically with the import tool. So if you're using the 5e rule set, you'll get like this nice summary here, which looks really good in the book format. You can actually copy and paste this part, and put it into a page so that you have it laid out like you would in an actual book. So you don't have to just have the link or a picture of it. You can actually copy and paste this information here into a page. Let's see what that looks like. So clipboard, copy. And then when you're actually doing a page, let's see, new subchapter, new page. Let's see what that looks like. So text block, and we're going to do Control V. Yeah, see, that's what it looks like. So that's a nice little summary of the actual stat block, and then you can put a picture in there. So let's do that. Let's ask for a photo right away, so we don't get too convoluted, get too distracted. Let's just got to have a good picture, a good token, you know, that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is prompt it to create an image that's based off of this information above. So I'm going to say create a detailed high definition fantasy illustration of a Lamia creature based on the context from above. And then I want to say, let's go with, let's see, create a detailed. Okay. And what I want to do is create a, let's see, based on the context from above. I want to say create a full body length. I'll say square. Nah, I don't want to say that. I'll just let it do what it needs to do. I'm going to say 35 millimeter lens camera. That usually gives it a little bit more of a nicer look to it. We'll see. So create a full body length detailed HD fantasy illustration of the Lamia creature above. Based on the context, based on the previous context. I don't need to say from above again. Okay, we'll see what it does. I like that you can kind of get away with this now. Before, you had to give it the full thing or the full description. Otherwise, it wouldn't do much. You don't even get close. But being that it has some context here, like that's why I include the appearance. Radiant, unnervingly perfect, our lower body is a gilded scaled serpent, while our upper body form mirrors a flawless humanoid draped in opulence. So we'll see if it picks up on that. That's one reason I include that in the prompts, just in case you want to make an image, and that might help with the overall aesthetic of it. So far, I like it. It's got like a little crown thingy. We'll see. It's already, oh, it's too perfect. It doesn't look scary. What do you know? But it says that up here. It's just an unnerving looking thing. It's supposed to be charming and, you know, that sort of thing. So I kind of get it. Okay. Like what I see so far. It's got gold and reddish color. Costume, jewelry looks like. Not cheap. The real stuff. I wonder what that stuff would be worth. Oh, wow. That is really nice. Okay. So that was the output. So what you could do with this is download it into your computer and then import it into Fantasy Grounds. And what you can do is make the stat block, instead of a full page, you can make it a half page. So you can put like the image on the left and then have the stat block on the right. So you can really make your books look really fancy. So now I want to make a POG. So I want to say create a fantasy POG based on the image above with a thin golden border. The POG background is a ruin temple. The background around the POG is plain white. And we do that so we can copy it, paste it, and get rid of the background easier. Around the POG, around the pig, is a plain white background. And then I'm going to say, to make it even fancier, I'm going to say, before I get into that, I'll say the Lamia's tiara crown sticks up a little bit past and over the border on top of the POG. So we're going to have it kind of poke out a little bit. And it can do this. I've tested it on other things. This was really hard to do like before. Now it has kind of has the knack, kind of knows what to do now. Sticks up a little bit past and over the golden border near the top of the pog. We'll see. So we're asking it to kind of make a pog based off of this image. Sometimes you do have to re-upload the image, because what I noticed is when you keep saying, make it like the last one, make it like the last one, well, eventually it doesn't even look like the last one, or the initial one, I should say. So it starts losing the original image after a while. So you can do this like 2 or 3 times, and then it starts kind of getting off topic. It essentially starts losing the original quality, the original look. It just starts getting further and further away from the original. So far, I like it. So you can see the little tiara thing sticking up, which I really like. And I like the idea that it's kind of cartoonish. So we can actually take this image and ask it to make it look more like this image if we want. So we can do that. But at least it's basing it off of the original, which is nice. Yeah, so this is kind of cool. You can do stuff like this now with a ChatGPT, and I think a couple other apps out there can do this. But I tried to do it with Ideogram. It didn't know what to do with it. It couldn't make this kind of pog. It could make the image, and I'd have to make the pog myself. But this one, you can kind of do it all in one fell swoop. And then when you download this, you can actually just take this background out and use that for the pog. So pretty neat. So that would take care of the artwork. So if you were going to import this, let's go ahead and do that. In this artwork right here, under this NPC where it says pictures, we can use this image after it's edited as the flat token. We can use this image up here as the actual picture or something like it. And then if we wanted to, we can make a 3D kind of, or an image like this, or take this image and cut out all the background. And essentially that would be the camera token. You can do that. That's where the work comes in. When you have a ton of stuff like NPCs, you got all that artwork if you want to use it. You can just use letter tokens. You don't have to do all this fancy stuff. So I want to copy this text, and I want to make another, create a full body length. I'll say like the pog above, using the same art style. Create a full body length, high definition fantasy illustration of the Lamia creature above based off of the previous context. We want a plain white background. We'll see if it can handle that. And I'll leave the camera thing on there. Actually, I won't. I'll take the camera thing off. I'll just leave it on there because it's gonna kind of go off of this. So we'll see how it turns out. So I'm going for, I don't want this picturesque quality. So that's because I said full body, HD, camera thing. So that kind of made it look more photorealistic, a little bit more like an oil painting. But this one looks more like a role-playing game kind of art, which I kind of like that sometimes better. This is really neat looking, like when you could take out the background and can animate it and such. But when you're just playing with your friends and such, I don't know if you actually need it to be that cool. I think that just you can get by with this, which I think is plenty. It gets the point across. It tells the story, whole 9 yards. We'll see how it turns out here. I'm hoping that it captures at least the full body. Sometimes though, it'll cut the tail off because you don't have the control as much in this app as you do in others to change the orientation of which way it's going to draw. I would have used a square instead of this rectangle, but we'll see how it renders. Yeah, it's doable. Yeah, definitely. So you can take this, put it in another program such as Canva, and it will take that right out. So you can make those pretty quick. Like if you take Canva, for instance, I'm just going to use a square Instagram, thing, and then just go in here and just hit copy image, and then Control Victor as in that. I want to make sure that it's using the full length because this is a 1024 by 1024 square. So I want this to fit at least most of this space because I want the full breadth of it. I don't want a crunch down version of it. So I'm trying to kind of expand it a little bit because of this space above and below, but we'll see. Click background remover. And Bob's your uncle right there. So this would be your camera token, so to speak. And then if you wanted to, you can actually stretch that out a little bit more. So you want to leave a little tiny bit of space, but at the same time, you're going to utilize more of this area. Because she is kind of not a huge thing, but the body is something you got to consider. And then I can add another page and do the same thing with the token. So if I go into back here, hit copy, and bring this up. There's your token. Now this is going to be a little bit too big for this, so I'll have to probably condense this down. This should only be, if this is a medium creature, you only want it to be like 256 by 256. However, I'm going to cheat a little bit. Probably go to like 300 by 300 because I want it to look a little bit bigger when it's rendered. But this is the difference in image size. So this would be for like a medium or slightly larger than a medium creature is kind of what I'm going for here. But you see you have all this room here. You wouldn't want to do it that way. So it's better if your canvas is going to fit this instead. But I can take out this background and just hold it here for now. And then when I'm ready, I'll do all the tokens at once, and I'll do all the full body art at once, that sort of thing, and then put those into Fantasy Grounds after I'm done with all of them, if I have them all. So that's something that you can do. And what I want to do is I want to take this, and what I'm going to say is, actually what I want to do, instead of saying do it again, like I was telling you, it will start forgetting. So this time though, oops, I want to copy the image, upload this image in, and I want to say add a fantasy ruined temple background, I'll say using the same art style above, but with a themed, I'll just say, but with a themed background. We'll see if it understands that. So that's what I'm saying. You want to use the original image instead of saying, okay, go back to the last one and go back to this last one. Keep doing that, and eventually this thing isn't even going to look close to what it started off like. So that's what I'm saying. You can do this maybe 2 or 3 times, but after that, you want to bring back the original image if you're going to do it, or bring back the image you want, because that's where it starts to wander, and it just kind of gets less and less like the original. Sometimes there's good things that come out of that, not very often. So we'll see. So as it's rendering, you guys, hopefully you're having a good weekend, and let me know if you guys like this. Variety is a spice of life. That's right, Bane. Sometimes those accidents are good. Plus, you can confuse your players that way. That's right. You don't want everything to look like the cliche that they are. So you can make a variation of something that looks a lot different or kind of the same, but not the same. And that may help. So I like the way this is turning out, but you'll notice with ChatGPT that this is starting to get slower. So that's not bad. It took that image pretty close enough, And it even shortened these blades so it would fit into this image. So that's why I would prefer a square, because the blades, but I can live with that. So what? They're daggers, right? Not necessarily scimitars, but close enough. So yeah, so now you got this full body art. You have a token or a pog, and then you got this like image, like storybook image. So, and now you could say, well, I'll say based off of the previous context. Watch this. So based off of the previous context, create a fourth level, say one shot. Nah, let's say adventure, because something like this is going to take a actual adventure. It's not like you're fighting kobolds here. Based off the previous context, create a fourth level adventure for 4 through 5 players using the template, using the uploaded adventure template. Got to be a little bit more concise. So we can do that. Say based off the previous, create a fourth level adventure outline. I don't want it to create everything. We'll just see what it does. So this is kind of your jumping off point, right? So you get all your art done, and then now I'm basing the adventure around the image instead of trying to fit the image around the adventure. That's really hard to do. So you're almost better off starting off creatively with something like this and writing around that instead of trying to write something and then making something for it. You have less control over the images than you do the text. So that's kind of why I did it that way. So I've learned that, if you can't control it, go with it, Yeah, so this is cool. So level 4, tier 1. It's got the background. It says, legends speak of a ruined temple deep within the jungle where a golden serpent witch lures the greedy and foolish. Few return, and those who do speak in broken whispers of illusions, cursed gold, and a voice that promises everything before taking it all. Zarathus, a cunning Lamia, has made the ruins her lair, weaving illusions and binding victims to her will. And it gets into the plot hooks. It wrote the adventure for area 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5. So it's 5 spots or areas. So it's kind of like your 5-room dungeon. There's your outro, your XP. And then what I'll usually do is have it go through again. I'll say, refine. I'll say, look for plot holes and weaknesses in the writing and design, and also expand some of the sections with a little bit more dialogue options, something like that. And then it'll go through it and kind of spiffy it up a little, maybe add a little bit more because it's very vague, kind of still kind of small. And then you don't want to go too big, but so they identified some weaknesses. So why is Zareth here? The player motivation weakness. While plot hooks exist, they could tie more directly into Zareth's manipulative nature, dreams, promises, cursed items, blah, blah, blah. Temple collapse trigger. The collapse feels very arbitrary. Why does Zareth cause it? Dialogue and social options missing. There's no opportunity for parlay or manipulation. And then thralls lack depth. So her generic enemies don't have a lot of depth. So now it's going to revise this and go into, and here we go. Here's the rollable list. That's exactly what I want, because when you go to import this into Fantasy Grounds, let's go to tables. And normally I'll hit this hamburger menu, and then I'll take this stuff here and paste that into the data here, in the data field, and then here's the dialog options. I'll say thrall dialog options. And then I'm going to make it delimited, and it's separated by the pipe, which is this line. And this first row is up here on top is the header. And on this column on the left, those are the rollable numbers, the range. So you import, and Bob's your uncle, just like that. So there's your options. You can lock it. You can test it out, see if it rolls properly. I got the chat window hidden under here, but yep. So there you go. Anyways, folks, you guys have a good weekend. Hopefully this helps a little bit. Let me know if you like this format better. This like split screen thing for creating content. And you guys, hopefully you get time to play Fantasy Grounds. Check it out. Also, using AI is not a sin anymore. You do have to be careful when you're selling and marketing, but as far as for your personal use, I don't see any problem with it. You guys take care.